enneagram, as Susan was telling us earlier, is a typology of human personality types. It's used as a way of understanding 9 interconnected different types. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the Enneagram and 3 different types in it. And that name, Enneagram, was created from the Greek words ennea, meaning 9, and gramma, meaning something that's written or drawn. The origins are not completely certain. Some claim that it's a synthesis of multiple ancient wisdom traditions. What we use today comes mostly from the teachings of a Bolivian spiritual teacher from the 1950s and a Chilean psychiatrist of the 1970s. They did compile several different older models of similar systems. So as a typology, the Enneagram defines 9 personality types, which are represented by points in this figure, and the figure itself is called the Enneagram. The lines of the diagram represent all sorts of different connections of types. We won't go into the details of those connections today, but if you read up on it, it doesn't take long before people start talking about a whole web of different types that you may be related to. While I find it useful and insightful, I'll give you an important disclaimer. There has been limited formal analysis of the Enneagram, and peer-reviewed research doesn't widely accept it in academic settings. To me, it's just like many other tools. Take what works and leave the rest. Like the Buddha said about his own teachings, these things are true to the extent that they reduce suffering in your life. If you don't find them useful, don't worry about it. As I mentioned, there are 9 personality types in the Enneagram, 1 through 9. They are the reformer, the helper, the achiever, the individualist, the investigator, the loyalist, the enthusiast, the challenger, and the peacemaker. The types might be described in slightly different words from one writer to the next, but the number always stays the same. For example, type 9 is sometimes called the peacemaker and sometimes called the mediator, but it's always number 9, and it always describes the same type of person. We have different personalities, and that is a beautiful thing. We are each shaped by nature and nurture in the long, complicated journey that brought us each here today. And with each of those personalities, there are both strengths and challenges. The healthier we are, the better able we are to bring the fruit of that personality to those around us. And conversely, the farther we regress into fear, anger, insecurity, the more problematic pieces of those personalities get highlighted. And often, our strengths and our challenges are different sides of the same coin. We'll talk more about the diversity of personalities and the beauty of it in a minute. But for now, I want to dive into a few of the types. Today, I'm going to talk about type 8, type 9, and type 1. Type 8 is usually called the challenger because these people seek out challenges. You might know one of these people in your life. They also give other people the opportunity to be challenged so that they can grow. 8s are typically charismatic and have the ability to persuade other people to join them in all sorts of adventures and endeavors. With their strong willpower and vitality, they feel most excited when they're exercising their power in the world. They use their energy to change things, to leave a mark on the world, and to defend the people that they care about. 8s learn from an early age that success requires strength, will, and endurance. One 8 described it this way. She said, "Much of my tenacity and toughness comes from my dad. He always told me not to let anybody push you around. It was not okay to cry. I learned to master my weaker side early on. At the tender age of 8, a huge horse ran away with me. When an adult caught the horse, I resolutely dismounted without a tear. I could tell my father was proud. In reality, no one is without fear. The main thing that type 8s fear is being controlled by others, whether that's physical, social, or financial control. So they focus a large amount of effort on making sure they retain their power and freedom. These are high energy folks that fill every role in society, from mother to mayor to baker to who knows what, teacher. But being in charge and leaving their imprint is part of their character. We might call him the rugged individualist. The more 8s build up their ego, though, as a shield, the more sensitive they become to any slight. Protecting themselves from hurt can lead them to emotionally shut down, sort of like a rock. But when 8s are healthy, they're incredibly driven with a can-do attitude. They're natural leaders with a solid, commanding presence. And as leaders, 8s are willing to take the heat, knowing that no decision can please everyone, yet as much as possible they want to look out for the whole group without playing favorites. Though type 8 and type 9 are neighbors on the enneagram, they are very, very different people. Type 8 is often called the peacemaker, like I said before. And no type is more devoted to internal and external peace and feelings of well-being. 9s are sometimes called the crown of the enneagram because they're located at the top and because they can embrace the sensibility of all other types. They're able to see and empathize with the perspective of others. But there's a cost to pay for that position. What 9s generally do not have is a strong sense of their own self-identity and opinions. Asserting themselves is very challenging. They'd rather melt into someone or something else, or quietly follow their own daydreams. 9 tends to focus on the bright side of life, so that their peace of mind won't be shaken. Their struggle, though, is seeing that the challenges and suffering of other types are real. As a phrase that I love, the only way out is through, is kind of the lesson of the type 9 that has to be learned. The 9s do have a really important role to play, though. They really shine in the role of mediator. One resource that I read this week told the story of a United Methodist pastor who was beloved as a couples counselor because both partners always felt like this pastor really understood their side of the story and what was really wrong with their marriage. It's easy for others to assume that 9s are on their side. The final type that I want to talk about today is a type 1, the reformer. 1s have a sense of mission to improve the world. They strive to overcome adversity, especially moral adversity, so that the human spirit can shine through and make a difference. They strive for higher values even at great personal cost. It kind of sounds like the ideal Unitarian Universalist as we describe them. There are lots of examples in history of type 1s. The most iconic among them are Gandhi and Joan of Arc. Gandhi left behind his career as a lawyer to become an itinerant advocate of Indian independence. Joan of Arc left her village in France to restore the throne and to expel the English from the country. The idealism of some type 1s has inspired millions. 1s spend a lot of time talking about the consequences of their action, as well as how to keep from acting contrary to their convictions. And because of all that ruminating, 1s sometimes persuade themselves that they're more in touch with logic and objectivity than they actually are. Really, they tend to be activists who are searching for rationale to do what they feel inside. They're usually seen by others as highly self-controlled, even rigid sometimes, although that's not how they see themselves at all. Ones believe that being strict with themselves and eventually perfect will justify them in their own eyes and in the eyes of others, but by attempting to create their own brand of perfection, they create their own challenge. As we all know, perfection is not part of this life. So there you have it. 8 is the challenger, 9 is the peacemaker, and 1 is the reformer. 8, 9, and 1 are lumped together as the types that are driven by intuition. That's why I told that story in the Time for All Ages that may have seemed a little out of place about the smuggler and the inspector. The border guard knew in his gut that something was amiss. For years, even though he couldn't find proof that something was being smuggled, a deep down hunch told him the truth. Similarly, types 8, 9, and 1 are driven by their gut instinct more than the other types. I lumped those together because they're driven by intuition. The other reason I started here is that I am one of these 3 types. It only seemed fair to start with myself if I was going to go down the road of describing personality types. So what do you think? Do you think I'm an 8, a 9, or a 1? Interesting. I'm pretty thoroughly ensconced as a type 8, with all its gifts and its shortcomings. And my partner, Ryan, is very much a type 9. You might say I've been doing my homework on understanding these types for a while. Personality types can help us better understand ourselves as individuals and also help understand a team. With the tapestry board this year, we're probably going to look at enneagram types to see what gifts and challenges folks bring to the team. Also to see what voices might be lacking in the room with only 8 or 9 of us. Looking at types can also be helpful for better understanding patterns that emerge inside our families. Just like the individual types, there are patterns that emerge between types that have both healthy and unhealthy tendencies. And recognizing those, naming them, can be a great tool for being more intentional together. If you're going to go through the trouble of finding your own type, I promise you it's much more fruitful to also know the type of the person you're sharing a life with. As I said earlier, I am a type 8. Ryan, my partner, is a 9. Now, some couples, especially same-gender couples, I jokingly refer to as same for same. They dress the same, and they like the same things, and sometimes they practically look like twins. That is not us. We are quite different, and there's a balance in that. In health, our differences can be a beautiful balance. Before I was aware of our enneagram types, I talked about us as a little bit of a yin and yang sort of balance. I bring a more intense energy that's about going and doing and achieving and making decisions and plans. He brings a yin energy, a calmer, laid-back, relaxed balance to our life together. Of course, the opposite is also true. When we're not doing well, our differences can exacerbate each other. For us, using the Enneagram to identify the directions both of us move when we're not our best selves has helped clue us into when it's time for a course correction. I imagine many of you are speculating about your own type as we sit here. There are several tests that you can take online for free. I'm reluctant to endorse any one in particular. I will say if you're going to search for one, include free in your search, or you might end up paying more than you imagined. I will also say pay careful attention to exactly what the test is for. In addition to the 9 primary types, there are all sorts of ways to dissect the system and tell you all sorts of different information. To start off with, you're best served just simply finding your type. And I will offer you a little bit of warning that I probably should have shared with the worship associates that I encouraged to do this. It can feel uncomfortable, even jarring, to have a mirror held up to you in this way. Some writers about the enneagram focus way too much on the deficits of each type. So keep in mind that each type also has strengths. And the other day, Ryan and I confided in each other in the car that we don't really like the type that we tested as, even though it's very accurate. According to some descriptions, my type feels like the big bully that steamrolls over everyone else. And Ryan said that he doesn't really like being the type that is the pushover of the enneagram. Then we immediately reminded each other that there are positive attributes to those types. So take what you find with a grain of salt, and maybe talk through it with someone you know will also point out your positive characteristics. And whether you look into your type or not, the simple idea of different types of personalities is worth celebrating. There is a beautiful diversity of personalities. At Tapestry, we often talk about other types of diversity, about racial, theological, sexual, economic diversity. We don't often address the internal differences that stir beneath those external ones. Because we have different personalities, different gifts, and different challenges, your journey of growing into your best self is going to look different from the journey of your neighbor. This is important. The area that you need to grow is probably different from the challenges of the person sitting next to you. Some people, like myself, need to cultivate more patience and understanding. For some of you, for the 9s, for the quiet, steadfast supporters, what you need most is probably to stop waiting around and speak up for your own needs. Our areas of needed growth are quite different. Half the work is in pinpointing what our own challenges are. And if you're interested in pursuing that kind of growth, the Enneagram might be a good tool for identifying the growing edges. On a more positive note, the best version of you is going to look very different from the best version of someone else. And that's a beautiful thing. We all have different gifts, deeply rooted in our being. We all have different ways of seeing the world, different ways of loving and trusting and creating change. We have different ways of being loyal and for fighting for what is true. There's no single right way of being in this world. Our job is to be the best version of ourselves, to bring the best version of our own gifts to share with our friends and our family and here at Tapestry. And our job as a community is to create space to explore and to thrive and to grow in more ways than we can imagine. Amen.